So you can see safflower here in Utah and Idaho is about a $7 million crop that we do. If you look at that in comparison to how we rank with some of the other states, surrounding states, you can see California typically is #1 with safflower production, followed by Montana, the Dakotas, and then Utah and Idaho up there in the kind of round out the top 5 and 6 safflower producing states in the U.S. And that fluctuates from year to year. This is just kind of showing you what a picture of safflower looks like out in bloom. When safflower comes out in bloom, it starts as a yellow, and then as it is pollinated, they'll move over into that orange phase there. But the nice looking field of safflower over in Logan right there. It is a member, safflower is a member of the thistle family, and you can kind of see in this picture right here, you can see those spines that are out on the bracts and that. Here, I'll kind of point some out with my clicker right here. Once it starts to branch out, that becomes really stiff and really hard, and probably want to limit your movement through safflower fields at that point in time, because those are quite sharp and they poke through your levis even if you don't have chaps and stuff on. So you have to be careful moving through that. The reason why people are interested in safflower, at least here in Utah and in Idaho, is because of the white seed coat that we can produce with safflower. You know, we don't get a lot of rains during the summer times, and so you don't have a lot of staining in that on that seed. And so you see the safflower here in front of you. Well, the birdseed market is where most of the safflower in Utah and Idaho goes to. And so you can see here's a birdseed mix. You can see that white safflower shows up nicely with some of the black sunflower seeds and the other grains that are in that. And so the birdseed market really likes Utah and Idaho grown safflower for the whiteness that we can get. Some of that is a varietal thing as well, and I'll show you how they do that when we talk about the varieties here. The great thing about growing safflower is the fact that we can put it in, we can grow it just like we do with our small grain. Put it in with a grain drill. You can kind of see on the left side of the screen here that some of the rates that you're planting it at, you know, dry land is about half of what our irrigated rates are. Our seed spacings and that, just there's not a lot of other things that we have to do to put that into the ground, as far as, you know, you're not having to change up your drill widths or anything like that. You drill it at what your grain drills are set up for. Safflower is not a heavy user of fertility. Nitrogen is typically what we're applying. Sometimes there's some call for some sulfur in that, but very low rates, and we get good yields out of that. Safflower is usually ready to harvest about 20 weeks from the time you plant it. We typically here in Utah and Idaho like to get it in latter part of April, if not the first part of May. And then when it's ready to harvest 20 weeks later, typically we're looking at a moisture of about 8%. And so this is a picture of a field that's ready to harvest in latter part of September, first part of October. And again, harvesting with the combine. USU Extension's put in about 15 years of research work into variety trials, row spacing, seeding rates, irrigation, dormant seeding, and you can see the other things. Recently, we've been doing quite a bit of work with fertilizer rates and with herbicide studies to help our growers out and answer some of their questions with. When you look at the different safflower types that are out there, there's two different types. There's oleic, which are monounsaturated fats, and then you got your linoleic, which is your polyunsaturated fat compounds. And kind of breaking those down into some of the different varieties that are grown on both sides here as we talk about that. Right now, there's really not, in the health food market, there's really not a lot of Utah and Idaho safflower that's grown for human consumption, but it's mainly birdseed market. Sometimes if diesel prices get high enough, there is some of that has moved out into biodiesel production. So this is a picture of some of our safflower plots, variety trials to be exact, out at Blue Creek. This is from 2015, and you can see that the safflower is in bloom here, and you see that there are some of these that are in earlier bloom, and some of them are just going out of bloom here. But that's what our variety trials look like. We do have a little bit of extra row in between the varieties to aid in harvesting and that. as I mentioned, it is a member of the thistle family, and you want to make sure you have plenty of room to work with those. Just an aerial with a drone, you can kind of see those same variety trials that are now ready to harvest right there. A nice set of plots out there at Blue Creek. Since then, we've actually gone, this is a picture of one of our fertility trials on safflower that we had out at Blue Creek last year in 2019. We've modified kind of our plot widths to about 10 feet by about 30 feet, and we're harvesting that at the center of those. But again, a nice set of safflower plots right there out at Blue Creek that we have. So let's talk about variety trial. This was done in 2015, and you can see we had about 11 different varieties in there. Now, the field standard that most people, 15, 20 years ago when we started doing safflower work was this S208. And here you can see it in our plots. You can see is right in the center of our variety trial. We yielded that particular year in 2015 on this 208 was about 930 pounds of seed. And you can see our better yielding ones was up about 100 pounds more. Our top variety that year was S333 at 1,028. And then we have some of these that were down here that were below 150 pounds. And so we had quite a range of on these varieties that particular year. One of the other things that as I mentioned, that our buyers and that want to grade our safflower on is the color scores. And this is where we look at that whiteness. So if you have something that's down in the 1s or below a 2, that's going to be a premium white safflower. Safflower is graded anywhere from 1 to 10, with 10 being dark seeds. And I have a picture of that here in just a second. I'll show you. But you can see that particular year, most of them are down in that 1s and 2s. Looks like we did have one of them that was a 3 that particular year. Apologize for this picture, but hopefully you can kind of see that over here on the left. You can see the 1. That's a nice white safflower. You can see quite a bit a brown tint to it. And these are actually a safflower that is quite a dark seed hole on it and is a 10. And so that kind of gives you a range of what that safflower might look like when it's graded for seed color. The other thing we look at or have looked at in the past is our test weights. And safflower here in Utah is going to be somewhere between 39 and 41 is kind of a typical range for test weights. And anything below and above, or actually below, is going to be probably discounted for you. And then the last thing that we look at here is our yield, is what can we figure out we're going to get. And so we kind of see that this particular year, our safflower gross income was graded on 20 cents per pound was what the contract price was for safflower that year. And so you can kind of see what that would make for that. Now, these were the 11 that we had in there. The cool thing about safflower is that a lot of times we don't have a lot of seed that's coming onto the market, whereas in corn and wheat and alfalfa, a lot of times you see a lot of varieties that are in there that are coming onto the market. With safflower, there's, you might get 1 or 2 every couple of years. And so right here in this box that I just put around, you can see these are variety trials or varieties that we've had out at Blue Creek for the last 8 years. And so that's really nice because now we can kind of see what that looks. Sometimes you've got a wetter year, sometimes you've got a dry year. You can really evaluate the performance of those safflower varieties based upon 8 years worth of data, and you've got a solid thing. So again, you can kind of see here's 208 right here in the center. Across those 8 years that we had, averaged about 930 pounds. Excuse me, get my thing out of the road. Averaged at about 1,020 pounds. And then you can see this S333 was about 30 pounds heavier across those 8 years. And so that gives us a good idea of what that 333 compares to 208 and some of the other ones that have been in there. Go to the middle of this chart, and you can kind of see this. So this 1221 is a variety that we've had in for 7 years, and the 3268 is one that we've had in in for 6 years, and you can see both of those did better than any of these original 5 that we had up in above. And so those are some nice varieties that we've had to look at. And then you drop down to the very bottom one, and this 7325 you can see is up there with that 1221 that are out there. I don't know if anybody's planting those varieties, but are definitely some varieties to hopefully they bring onto the market that we can use here in Utah and Idaho. I show you this. This was our in 2013, and I put this one in here because if you notice, here's the field standard right here, this 208. Here's our 333, which looked really good across those 8 years. And then you throw out this top yielding variety for this year, and it was, you know, almost 350 pounds more than our field standard that particular year. But when you looked across those multiple years on that, you can see this one looked very good, but it's something to keep an eye on for that. Many of you are probably wondering, where can I go for finding information about safflower in Utah and Idaho? USU Extension's got some publications out there. You can see here on growing safflower, there's some stuff on dormant seedings. There's some budgets that are out there. So I encourage you, and you'll probably see us throughout today and tomorrow, that people, the planners of this and Extension are telling you to go out to the USU Crops website. If you click right here on the bottom where it says safflower right here, you can see here some of those publications right here. Towards the bottom are some of our variety trials, both on irrigated and dry land. So there's a wealth of information out here on the crops weather website. Just showing you here some pictures of some of our earlier work that we did with our planting rates and variety and row spacings. This is 30-inch row spacings. We were interested in growing it and seeing how well it performed on wider row spacings that you'd come in and clear cultivate in between the rows. And so that's a picture was taken in mid-July. Here, on the left of this screen, you can see there's those 30-inch row spacings about harvest time, right before harvest time. There's completely filled in. You can also see over here on the right side, these are some 18-inch row spacings. So, you know, we've done it anywhere from 6 to 30-inch row spacings, and you saw that safflower still performs very, very well for us. You know, here's some of those wider row spacings. This is actually a 24-inch row spacing out at Blue Creek. And again, you can see water being the limiting factor out here, and so they did not fill in like you would see as if you're doing an irrigated variety. There's been quite a bit of work done with some dormant seeded safflower. One of some growers came to us and says, "Hey, can we put safflower in as like we do winter wheat, get that to come up in a rosette and overwinter it in the rosette stage?" And what we found was no, that we can't get it to come up. There's not enough moisture to get it up in the fall time of the year, but what we can do is put it in as a dormant seeding, put it in late enough in November, first part of December, let that seed sit in the ground until the conditions are right in the springtime of the year. And then we can come in and capitalize on that moisture. And so on the left of the screen, you can see this is some dormant seeded safflower plants right here. On the right side, these are some spring seeded safflower plants. And you can see the height difference. These are both the same variety, but the height difference here. And this is what happens to those plants. Those plants that are able to capitalize on that moisture, we're finding that we're getting 50 to 60 seed pods on that versus on some of the spring seeded stuff, you know, somewhere between 5 and 10. And so obviously the more pods, the more seed you're going to have and the better your yields are going to be. And that's what we found with some of that. We're finding in some of those dormant seeding trials that we're getting anywhere from 50 to 150 pounds more seed that is dormant seeded versus spring seeded. That leads us to another problem that we have with weed pressure, and that's led us into another one that we have. This is just showing a trial that we did with some alternaria, looking at spraying a fungicide on it to control that, to keep that out of staining the seed code. And so there's a lot of research that's out there on safflower that Utah State University has done. Just want to say thank you to those who have helped us with these research variety trials on safflower right here. And I know we're kind of short on time, and so we're going to skip questions right